asked to speak with you today to have a chance to clarify what I believe is some misinformation. I'm here as the judge in Vigo Superior 5. I oversee the drug court. And I just want to make sure that the public gets the facts clearly stated. That really is all that I can do as a judge, is just make sure the facts are clearly stated. I've heard different statements about restructuring, and we still have those services. Statements that seem to imply that in some fashion or another the drug court will continue. Let me be very clear. Our drug court will close in December of this year, and that's by order of the Judicial Center. To be a drug court, you must be certified. It has to be certified by a judicial officer. A judicial officer must have an employee called a drug court coordinator to operate a drug court. When the council took away all the funds, it removed the funding source for that employee. We now must close. Now, and that's a decision for the council to make. But I don't think using the term alcohol and drug program and drug court in the same sentence is appropriate. And here's why. An alcohol and drug counseling program is not the same as a drug court. They simply are not the same program. Alcohol and drug counseling programs are useful. I've heard it said that it helps keep people out of jail. Well, let me be clear about that. We don't use alcohol and drug counseling programs to keep people out of jail. It's a program we send people to after they have been in jail. Drug courts, on the other hand, operate prospectively. That is, they look forward. They keep people out of jail, and the studies are clear they're effective in keeping people out of jail. And they're effective in helping people get sober, stay sober, and return to a productive life. And so those are issues that I wanted to make sure were clear. Alcohol and drug court are not the same thing. Yes, we have an alcohol and drug counseling program, terrific program, support it. It's not a problem. That's a vendor-run program. It's called a brokered model system. I have no problem with that. My concern is about the drug court, which will close in December.
Is the council aware of this distinction, and maybe that's why they closed drug court, thinking they were both one and the same?
I think there may be some confusion on their part. It seems to be that in using alcohol and drug court as if they were the same thing, or as if the services continued, that they seem to have a fundamental misunderstanding. And I can understand why. These are not mental health professionals. They're not drug counselors. They don't work with these people on a day-to-day basis. They have other lives. They have full-time jobs. You know, these counsel positions are part-time positions. So maybe the misunderstanding is just not understanding exactly what a drug court does. And that's why I've taken this time to try to make clear a drug court program is overseen by a judge. It's a very tightly focused program that holds addicts accountable. These people come in, plead guilty, go through our program, and if they're successful, we dismiss the charges. There's nothing equivalent that can be done by a non-certified program. You may not, as a non-certified program, take a plea of guilty and defer entry of judgment of conviction. You may not do that. That's prohibited. If you're a certified program, as we were, you can take a plea of guilty, not enter judgment of conviction, defer it for 2-3 years, the time it takes for people to get sober. That's an important distinction. That's something to understand. That's why drug courts are powerful. What's the motivation for a person who's been convicted and sentenced to alcohol and drug to get clean? What's the motivation? Well, the motivation is negative. If you don't do this, I will punish you. If you don't do this, I will send you to jail. That does not motivate people. That creates resentment. It creates resistance. It creates more problems. But if you bring them into drug court and you say, plead guilty, I'll not sentence you, I'll not enter judgment of conviction, I'll give you a chance to get clean. There's the motivation. That's the secret power of how these programs work, because it relies on motivation to get the person engaged. And once they can get engaged, then we can bring them into recovery. And after they've been recovered for a while, and after they've worked on their recovery, and they begin to see that their thinking's clear, then we can talk to them about, well, what about some job training? What about a job? What about training for this? How can we help you to not go back to drugs? Can we put you through a relapse prevention program? Actually, we oftentimes require that, frankly. That's what people must understand about drug court programs. They're not the same as alcohol and drug. And that's one of those critical distinctions.
So, did you have any discussions with any of the 7 members of council about drug court, about cutting it, or just talking about the court in any way, shape, or form?
The last time I had any discussion with council members, there was no indication to me that drug court would be closed. It was clear to me that they intended to go to a brokered model. And they expressed an understanding, well, community corrections and this new person who's going to run our A&D program will assist you with drug court. Well, it became rapidly apparent to me that none of those things were true. And it was shortly thereafter that I find out that they've had a vote and there's no budget for drug court at all. So it was never clearly communicated to me that they intended to defund drug court. I understand, and again, draw the distinction. Alcohol and drugs one thing, drug court's another. I was reassured that drug court would continue.
Who reassured you?
Well, the particular person.
Or if you want to give just a vague title, that's fine.
Well, the only reason I hesitate is I'd rather focus on what the facts are, and I'd rather focus on solving a problem here rather than getting into, well, he said this, or I was promised that. By naming people, it seems to indicate that I'm in some way attacking that person, and that's not my intent. I'm not interested.
Appreciate that, but isn't there also a certain level of holding them accountable for jumping to a conclusion?
Well, I think it'd be better if the voting public decided for themselves who to hold accountable and who they believe they should vote for, and because we are in a voting season, let's face it, I understand that. I know that. But I think it's better that we focus on what are the facts, how do these programs work, why should we support them, and let's do that in some fashion that's positive, looking forward.
Now, the defunding of drug court, can you explain to me how much the county has paid into drug court or allocated for drug court every year? From my understanding, and this is probably totally wrong, it was a self-funded program where it was based on user fees as the people who came through paid for their part of drug court, so it didn't, drug court itself wasn't supposed to cost the county anything, was my understanding.
Yeah, it's always hard to know because we had this blended program where we had alcohol and drug counselors and we had drug court counselors, and they were cross-trained, and so the reason being that that's a more efficient way to run these programs. One person could do alcohol and drug counseling, but then alcohol and drug counselor could also work in the drug court. That was a cost-saving measure that we implemented some years ago. It's very difficult to say, and I keep coming back to, by making adjustments over a period of years, we had gotten the bottom line down to $20, $30, $40, at most $50,000 to operate this entire program, A&D and drug court. And that's because, yes, we collected user fees, we had grants, et cetera. One important thing that I would point out, I heard it said that drug court users paid $400. Well, that immediately told me the person saying that did not understand the distinction between A&D and drug court. $400 was an A&D alcohol and drug fee. Drug court users pay a $50 a month fee up to a total of $1,800 to participate in the program, and they must pay that fee before they graduate. Hugely important to keep in mind.
Okay, so as far as payroll for staff for drug court, it was my understanding that that came from A&D. That was Paul Southwick in A&D,
Mm-hmm.
who was paid through A&D. So drug court, while they used him, did not pay for him.
Yeah, I think that's one way to look at it, that when you look at all of the things that Paul did, he was the director for alcohol and drug, and he was the drug court coordinator, so he wore two hats, but was paid one salary. I mean, he was quite a remarkable individual. A recovering, and I know Paul wouldn't mind my saying this, a recovering addict himself, so he clearly had insights that are just absolutely irreplaceable.
Okay, so kind of as coordinator, he was essential to the drug court program, and he also met the criteria from the judicial center.
Yes.
To certify.
Yes, he had a bachelor's degree and had passed the certifying exam.
So that leads me to my next question. Was in contacting the judicial center yesterday, I wanted to get clarification about problem-solving courts.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that a county can set up problem-solving courts, such as Vigo County has a mental health court that is not any certified court.
Right.
Because of it, just certain things that wouldn't fit with what the state requires. So couldn't drug court be reestablished as its own local problem-solving court without the certification?
Yes, and keep in mind, if you do that, you cannot accept a plea of guilty and defer sentencing. You can have a problem-solving court, but if you do that, then you're doing it either before the person is ever convicted, which means delaying their right to access to the courts, or you're doing it post-conviction, which is more common. You're doing it post-conviction.
Okay. So in the...
And by the way, I'll look into that as an option and explore it. I've already had many discussions with the Judicial Center, and I'll continue to explore that as an option, because in whatever form we can do it, we want to keep this program alive.
So, but you would still have to have a coordinator, somebody to oversee it.
Well, you still have to have people that do this. I mean, our vendor here is not going to be willing to work for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be overhead expense. There's going to be employees that are needed to run it.
Okay. So for my own understanding, for clarity, so now a defendant will enter a plea of guilty, and then that's deferred until they can successfully complete, or you enter judgment of conviction and they are sentenced.
That's right. If they're successful, then the plea is set aside, the charges are dismissed as if they never happened.
And you can't do that with a non-certified program?
You cannot do that. You cannot take a plea of guilty and defer a sentence.
Doesn't sound like it'd be as effective if you did it post-conviction.
That's the issue. If you do it post-conviction, they're already convicted, what's the motivation? But if you do it plea of guilty, now they've already admitted their guilt, and so they're committed. They have skin in the game, so to speak. They are committed to this program, and there are huge consequences if they fail. Again, all of this operates off of human motivation. You know, it's just common sense. It's things that we all understand.
Now, the timing also of this issue, it's been kind of known that alcohol and drug has been laying off folks. It's just there's not the volume of people, and so you couldn't staff, and so they've
Right.
been on the decline. So it kind
That's
of
right.
is not a surprise when the county said alcohol and drug can go away and we can do it, we'll save money.
That's right.
So
That's right.
there's been warning signs all along,
Yes.
and especially last fall when the budget's passed and there's no money for this. So why now?
Ah,
we
yes.
we are in an election season.
We are.
And
We are.
it's you could wait 2 weeks and
Sure, that's a valid point, and certainly among the judges we've had discussion about that, whether it should be released now or after the election. When I discussed that with a number of my friends, they were shocked. You know, why would you wait until after the primary? That would be like, did you have something to hide? Why did you not let me know that this was happening? And so part of what motivated me in the first place, and by the way, I began working on this several months ago to try to decide whether or not we should raise public awareness. So while it happened to occur right in the middle of the primary season, the work on it started a long time ago. But I had to make sure in running this information by that I intended to release, the information that I intended to release, I had to make sure that I'd consulted with counsel. Were there any ethical objections? Was there anything about the release that in some way did not seem appropriate? And so the wording had to be made very carefully crafted. And so we did that. And then it had to be discussed internally here among the judges, and there was some disagreement there about whether or not it should go out. Some thought it should, some thought it shouldn't. In the end, I think most of the other judges felt like, well, let's just wait until after the primary. In talking to my friends, some of them very prominent people here in the community, they felt like to delay it would be unwise. Why would you do that? And then after the primary, have it announced, because it would in fact look like, well, were you hiding something? Why did you not tell me that before? This is information that I might have wanted to have heard in making a decision. And then there is just in general that we're in an election season. This is the time when people turn their attention toward local government, toward state races, toward the national races. Most of the time, most of us are too busy raising kids or going to grandkids' ball games or track meets and so forth. People are busy with their lives. These are not things that are talked about around the dinner table. These are very, very narrow issues. They don't come up often. They happened at this point to have come up now. I think the other thing that motivated me was I felt like I'd run out of options. I really don't have many options. And at some point, with people continually asking me, what's happened to drug court? Because there was some knowledge. I had a lawyer in yesterday who stopped in and said, well, what's going on with our drug court? He didn't know. He happens to be a public defender, but he didn't know what's going on. Well, does the public have a right to know or not? I think the public has a right to know facts, and that's why I hesitated earlier to begin singling out this council member or that. Look, I respect the council. The council is the budgetary authority in the county. They have decisions to make, hard decisions to make. That's fine, I respect that. I respectfully disagree in their defunding this program, however. And I think I have a right, if not a duty, to say something about that and to say to the members of the public, is this who we are? Is this what we want to do? Discuss it. You know, that's what Paul Ryan says, our Speaker of the House. Let's not talk ideology, let's talk about ideas. This is an idea. Let's talk about it.
How much money did they defund for drug court?
Well, that's always hard to say because essentially they said zero.
Yeah.
But
yeah, but I think that's one place where the confusion comes in, that by you know getting rid of A and D, they in essence got rid of
drug court at the same one stroke.
Yes.
Right. Yes.
So yeah.
Well, I think to keep the program running would have probably, it might have required a bare bones program with, say, a probation officer, which is what I suggested at one point. I would say probably $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 at most. And then I'd come back and say, well, all right, if it's $60,000, 3 people kept out of prison, 5 people out of the jail for a month, and it's paid for. Yeah, you've got to pay some money up front. And then the objection, of course, is, well, I don't see the payoff. Well, yeah, it's a little bit abstract, but not very.
Okay.
I hope, is that clear?
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
in some ways I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but on the other hand, I have members of the public. I had a fellow stop me outside the courthouse over the lunch hour. He goes, "Judge, are you going to keep your drug court?" I thought, I've never met this guy. He said, "I work out at the federal prison." He said, "I've seen it all. I've seen it all. Drug courts work. Why are they not funded?"
Oh, that's something else I want to ask you. So what happens to a person now who would be a good candidate for drug court, but you're not taking any new cases in? What are their options? Is it just to get a conviction and deal with the consequences?
Unfortunately, we take a step back. We go back 20 years to before drug courts were in place here in the county, and before our drug court was here in the county. And so we go back to an old system of, well, you're sentenced and you go to this program, and if you don't go, I'll put you in jail or I'll punish you. It's a step backward. It's back to an old system. I mean, we're way beyond that now. And frankly, I just don't believe that's who we are as a people. We're not that as a community. We want people to get better, and we want them to go to work. We don't want to punish them, make them resentful, or resent the whole system. Oh, it's all about money. I hear that so much. It's all about money. You just want my fee. I don't blame people for feeling that way.
Do you think people's attitudes need to change to see addiction more as a disease than as a criminal action? Somebody told me if you just saw it the same way you see diabetes, then you would see, well, let's treat it.
Right. I think there's some truth in that. If we looked at it more through that lens, it would be more accurate, because that's what it is. And that's not to say that addicts or alcoholics don't commit crimes. They do, and you have to be held accountable for the crime. But the accountability in my mind is, look, you're abusing a drug or misusing alcohol. This needs to stop. We're going to get this cleaned up, and here's why. So accountability, yes, but a little bit of punishment really goes a long way. Jail can be a remarkably clarifying experience over a period of 4 or 5 days. It doesn't have to be 10 and 20 years.